Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to Max Reviews. Here am I, Brayden. This is Max Reviews, and today we're gonna be talking about probably the most controversial Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man 3. Well, actually, it might be the second most. That's put Spider-Man Far From Home above it. And if we're including Venom and Venom, Let There Be Carnage, that would be the highest. But right now, I'd say for actual Spider-Man movie, I would say Spider-Man 3 is one of the most controversial. So, for this movie, I'm going to be diving into it, going through the plot, going through the good, the bad, and everything about this movie. It's a very interesting movie. When I first saw it, I was very disappointed by it, and then I was wincing and cringing at a bunch of it. But as time's gone along, I think I've gotten more used to it. It's become a bit better. It's probably moved up a bit higher on my lists. But for right now, at least, I'm still not really 100% positive on it. So, with that said, let's get going on the good for this movie. So, even though this movie does have a bunch of plot holes and a bunch of problems with it, we're going to be starting with the good here. And for the good, I would say the characters and the relationships work just as good as ever. Because you do have Harry being everything that Harry is and turning bad, and then losing his memory and then turning good again. And in that final fight, when he turns good again and he comes to fight for MJ and Peter, our trio of characters must end, and it's just the saddest thing. Also, this movie I think could be a lot more insightful and emotional sometimes than the other ones. It's probably not as emotional, but insightful, and it could get dark, and those moments sometimes do work. And the ending, you see the ending of the first two, it's triumphal. You have Spider-Man swinging through the city in the first one. In the second one, you have Spider-Man swinging, then we cut to MJ, who's like, go get him, Tiger. This one, it's a sad embrace with Peter and MJ. It's not a kiss. It's not, he gets the girl and he lived happily ever after. No, it's she's accepting him again, which is going to be very interesting to see in Spider-Man No Way Home. Will Peter have gotten the girl? Did MJ and him live happily ever after? Did that happen? If we see him in Spider-Man No Way Home, it's going to be very interesting. For the villains, I think at times Venom can be interesting. He was definitely tacked on, but Eddie Brock wanting to kill Peter Parker, that's sort of understandable. He took his girl, he took his job, he destroyed everything. And that was because of the Venom, and how that plays out isn't exactly the greatest, but it does have this interesting thing to it where you slightly understand Venom. And Venom isn't really a character, but it's more like Eddie Brock, the bad guy. But I could say the fights, while not being the best, they look like the second... They look a bit worse than in Spider-Man 2, but they still look better than the first one. The CGI isn't as easy to tell. Harry, everything with him I think works pretty well. Him being bad and then turning good again, and then being bad and then turning good. I think it works. And then Sandman, I'm still sort of mixed on Sandman with everything. He's got the just generic, it's a good thing to be doing what I'm doing because I have a daughter kind of a thing. Which is, I don't like him as much. He's definitely better than Venom, but he still has problems where he turns into Sandman, which is a very interesting character, I guess, but I don't know if he's executed in the greatest, with everything that happens with him along the way. It could be emotional with the stuff talking about, marriage, Aunt May being emotional, talking about Uncle Ben. I can understand that, bringing Uncle Ben back, talking about them getting married, and that could cause pain, but I don't understand what they did with Sandman. Peter and MJ getting married, well, supposedly getting married, that's emotional. And then I'm actually going to put this on the positive, the infamously, over the top, everybody knows about it, dance scenes. I'm going to put that on the good because they're cringy. They are. And I totally agree with it. If you hate it, I understand. You're turning like my favorite character of all time, my favorite Spider-Man, and he's being horrible. He's being a jerk. He's being the worst. And Then he does his dance scenes and just like in your face kind of thing, and you just hate him even more. That is what it's supposed to be, and you understand what it is. I understand. First time watching it, I cringed at it. It was horrible. But now, after rethinking it, I'm understanding that it showing that what Peter thinks. He thinks he's the best, and he isn't the best. And now he can understand it. It's not the best thing, but it's what it's supposed to be. The whole Bully Maguire thing, it could just get bad, I gotta say. And I could say they tried to go with the basic formula sometimes, because I was timing some things, and within the first 6 minutes, Harry has already shown up. We see our trio first 6 minutes all sort of like together kind of a thing, and that sort of works. But I don't know with the rest of the stuff. I gotta say, like, one of the best parts of the entire movie is the final battle. The Venom stuff, he looks cool. Sandman is slightly interesting, but Venom looks cooler when he's actually Venom, okay? And then Harry returning and fighting for them. That's, like, the best part of the movie, where you add them talking back and forth. You add the banter. It's great. Little assorted action scenes. Harry versus Peter is good. And then you understand what's going on with MJ favoring Harry over Peter because Peter's being a jerk and just focusing on Spider-Man. Harry is turning back into a good guy, actually, and stuff, and he's being good. And that first scene with him is great. Turning into Green Goblin. He's not as good as his dad, nowhere near, but at least you have that small bit of him where it's like, he is turning bad, he's fighting Peter, and then he turns good again. It's sort of frustrating, but this movie as a whole is frustrating, so I could accept it. Other good things, I could say that J. Jonah Jameson, he is just as good as ever in it. You don't see him as much as usual, but his little jokes and stuff, they're still good as ever. Probably not as good as in Spider-Man 2. But he's just good as in Spider-Man 1. He's still great when you see him, but you don't see him enough. And then when you see the Rent guy, he's still fun as ever, but you don't see him much. They're undershadowed. Okay. I think that's about as far as I'm going to get with the good. So now we must get into the bad. And the first big, humongous problem in this movie is that it's called Spider-Man 3, and it has Venom on the case. If you look at this case, let's see. It says Spider-Man, and it also has Venom on the case. Now let's reflect. Venom and Harry and Peter. Venom, Sandman, and Harry, the new Green Goblin. We have 3 villains. That takes a lot of time. These movies only usually have 1. So, first time that we see Harry's in 6 minutes, right? So Harry, he's developed well enough. Sandman, we see him within the first 14 minutes, and then he sort of like gets his powers and does all this stuff. But here's the big thing. We see all these villains. I haven't talked about Venom yet. He's going after this, but Spider-Man. The movie is called Spider-Man, and we don't see actual Spider-Man fighting people and doing stuff until a half an hour in the movie. A half an hour. We see Peter. We see him do stuff, but we don't see suited up Spider-Man fighting crime until a half an hour in the movie, which is frustrating. And then Peter Parker and Spider-Man both, they're just the worst. Peter Parker isn't the worst, but Spider-Man choosing Gwen over MJ, kissing her in front of the entire crowd of people, getting so caught up in his own thing, and then taking the Venom thing, not really 100% knowing, but liking it better. Him trying to kill Sandman, actually going to the dark, and then fighting them. He gets better in the ending, but you gotta understand, with the Venom scenario, Bully Maguire, he was a jerk. He was horrible. And so you don't like Spider-Man in his own movie, which no other Spider-Man movie has done that, where you don't like Spider-Man in his own movie. Sure, you can feel bad for him. You don't 100% agree with him, but you still like him. In this movie, you don't like him, except for in the beginning, like the first 10 minutes. The first 20 minutes, I'd say. He's good. And then the final 20 minutes. Though that's the only time where you like Spider-Man. Well, or Peter Parker. So that is so frustrating for this movie. But the other big thing, Venom was tacked on in this movie. First 10 minutes, Venom goo from a comic comes on Peter's motorcycle. You see him once again, but he doesn't actually do anything until 53 minutes later, where, an hour and 3 minutes into the movie, he attaches to Peter. Venom is missing for a humongous part of the movie when he is on the case. He's on the case, people. Come on. So Venom is almost missing from the movie, and Venom has no, like, character. Like, in the movie Venom and Venom Let There Be Carnage, he's an entire character. This movie, he's just some alien goose symbiote thing that makes you stronger. That is it. He's just like a suit. And then even when he's away from Eddie, he turns into this big monster like, ah! I'm trying to kill Peter. So Venom is so underutilized in this movie. And when Peter comes awake for the Venom symbiote scene, that looks super cool. That's in the good. But then you have the Bully Maguire stuff, which some of it works, and then we get to the darkest part of any Spider-Man movie ever, where he punches MJ. What? This is absolutely horrible. But you understand slightly, this isn't Peter, this is Venom. Altering his senses, turning him worse. And then that's sort of like the breaking point where it builds up to all this, and then he just punches her. So dark. And then he realizes, oh, I'm going bad. And he just sort of he gets rid of the Venom. But still, that's a giant problem with Venom. Another thing, the villain, Sandman, where they go back with Uncle Ben with that. I don't like that. I understand some of it, but there's some slightly good stuff to it, but overall, basic idea, no matter how you execute it, going back to the Uncle Ben plotline with a new villain, where you'd already established that this guy hadn't been the problem. So you're telling me that it is slightly still this guy's fault, but Sandman was there. So it just goes around in a circle to nothing. Harry, I think he was a pretty good villain. He had his problems. But the big plot hole with Harry is the random butler guys like, he was slain by his own blade. There's no question about it. Why couldn't he said that in Spider-Man or Spider-Man 2? Why did he have to wait till Harry turned into the new Green Goblin, fought Peter, got almost killed by Peter, and is there, like, after all this time, almost being killed, and almost being killed by Dr. Octopus, and almost being killed by his best friend, going through all this pain, because the butler didn't tell him earlier. Like, really? Why? This giant thing, that's the redemption arc for Harry. I understand that he has to learn that, but he doesn't have to learn it from the butler, who could have told him at any other time. It's just so frustrating with that. If I had to keep going, the final fight, Sandman, he looks pretty cheesy, the big version of Sandman. I know this is like the first time where somebody grows super big and fights, he doesn't look too great, but I could slightly accept it. And then Venom looks good. He looks comic accurate, pretty interesting. You take Venom away and you have Eddie Brock with fangs. And he looks horrible. He's got these giant eyebrows and he's got these crazy look in his eyes. Horrible. He looks so bad. And if they hadn't shown that, Venom might have actually looked cool and gone down as like this cool but bad villain. Which, for being tacked on the movie, I'm sort of fine with that. He looks cool. If he was just no fangs, no actual just like talking stuff like that, if he just so bad. But this movie, after going through the like good and the bad, this movie, Spider-Man 3, is flawed, but I still enjoy to agree, and it still does have some of the magic of the first two Spider-Man movies, while not having the same exact kind of magic. It is different. It is sometimes overly hated by critics and audiences like myself, and it is also sometimes over liked in my opinion and put too high on the lists. Me, I have my criticisms, I have my takeaways, I have my good, I have my bad, and I enjoy it. I also have problems with it. So, I think it's pretty good. On the letter score overall, I think I gotta just give it a B minus. On the entertainment scale, it does have some pretty convincing stuff, but it also does have the weird fags, guys. So I gotta give it a 7.5. That's my review for Spider-Man 3. This is probably gonna be, I don't know, maybe it'll be controversial, maybe it won't. Maybe it'll be a hot take, maybe it won't. But for me, I enjoy it to a good degree. I understand why it gets its criticisms. It's a very disappointing end to the Raimi trilogy, but I still really do like the Raimi trilogy. Thank you. Next, we're going into The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2. And then, I forgot about this one, but we do have to do Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. That is 100% probably going to be my most controversial film. You'll see why. Thank you for watching. I'm Braden. This is Max Reviews. Please like, subscribe, comment down below. What's your favorite Spider-Man movie, and what's your most controversial opinion? Thank you. I'm Braden. This is Max Reviews. Braden out.